Are you sober and alive right now? If so, this podcast might be for you. We talk to all different types of people from all different lengths of sobriety about how they're staying sober and sane during these trying times. This is Sober During Crisis. What's going on, everybody? It's Buxton, bringing you a little mini episode this week. Still gonna drop our full-length episode on Friday like we do every Friday, and I'm really excited for it. As always, it's a good conversation. Love having chats with people about how they're staying sober. It's super helpful, and I would say my sobriety is by far the strongest it has ever been. And it's just because I'm continuously talking to other people about how they're staying sober. You know, is this normal? That's a question I like to ask a lot. Is this relatable? Like, how did you deal with this problem? How are you dealing with your character defects as they come up? Or, as I like to call them, my discarded coping strategies. The stuff I used to use that are now just basically baggage, you know? There's so many things I'm learning about myself, about society, about the people around me. I mean, I would say today I pay attention in ways I never even could have fathomed when I was drinking and using. Like, I was just so selfish and in my own world. Like, my problems were the only things that mattered to me. And today, no, like, I try and be a lot more focused and aware, and I pay attention to my impact rather than just focusing on what my intentions were. It's been a tough lesson to learn, but I keep learning it. Hopefully I never stop learning. That's my goal, is to never stop learning and never stop changing. With all that being said, this little mini episode is to bring you a reading that I did in a meeting I went to. Again, I do not speak for or represent AA or NA or any 12-step program. I'm just an individual with a podcast where I talk to people about how they're staying sober. That's it. I don't speak for any organization. Like, I'm not even a licensed clinician or anything like that. I'm just a person that used to rely so much on alcohol to live and on drugs to live. And now I say I'm free of that. I do rely on other people, but, you know, it's all right. I think that's a good thing to do. And I'm going to continue doing it because people keep coming through. It's crazy how when you ask for help, help comes. Like, one of my favorite speaker tapes is this dude, Adam T. He's mad funny, and he says, help is the dirtiest four-letter word in a meeting. And I agree with that. I mean, it's crazy how that word help has such a stigma on it. So this Living Sober text is AA-approved literature, and I used to turn to it before I went to any party or went anywhere where there was going to be alcohol, because it has this really awesome chapter on what to do if you're in an environment where other people are drinking. And it just has really practical advice, like always have a drink in your hand so nobody offers you one. I mean, that just takes away the temptation of, like, you know, the awkwardness too of having to say no, but then being like, oh, should I? Like, no. When I was in college, I would pour Red Bull into a solo cup. It looks just like beer. And, you know, you can't really chug Red Bull. I guess you can chug Red Bull, but don't chug Red Bull. You will have a heart attack. Or you will just have crazy anxiety at least. But, you know, there's little practical tips like that in this book. I do recommend getting it, especially if you're new. I used to just pick a random number every morning and read that chapter. There's 31 different chapters, and like some of the titles are like getting plenty of rest, first things first, fending off loneliness, getting out of the if trap, steering clear of emotional entanglements, seeking professional help. Like, it's just really practical advice. Granted, some of it is definitely outdated, so you would have to apply it to our modern technology and, you know, the year 2020, quarantine protocols and all. So the chapter we read in the meeting was called Making Use of, quote, Telephone Therapy, which is pretty funny, I guess, because, like, when I hear the word telephone, I immediately picture that old yellow one where it has, like, the bass and the cord, and you, like, wrap the cord around while you're talking to your second grade crush or whatever. Like I said, it's definitely a little outdated, but what it says still applies, and I found it really applicable to this podcast, just in terms of the way it has helped me grow my sobriety. Talking to different people about what they're doing to stay sober is, like, just the most eye-opening thing. I'm getting so many resources, and just getting to hear people's stories and people's journeys with sobriety. It's like, oh man, like, we're really not that different. Like, anybody who used to rely on drugs and alcohol to cope with life, we have that in common automatically. And so some of our same emotional stuff and our spiritual journey, like that's going to be similar or parallel. Something I used to do, I don't know if I'm alone in this, I might be the only nut that used to do this, but I would listen to sober podcasts or speaker tapes, and then I would like, when I was done listening to something, I would go and like talk to myself about it and like act like I was on the show, right? I'm sure people do stuff like that. I don't know for who, but maybe you're also a stage person like me. So I would practice stuff acting like I was on the show. First of all, if you're doing that with this podcast, just hit me up. You can be on it. It's not a big deal. But second of all, I would fall into this trap that I hope to prevent others from falling in, which is talking to yourself too much. It doesn't prevent you from making the same mistakes you've made in the past, right? Because you're really only talking to the committee in your head. So we have to get perspectives outside of our own perspectives so we can make good choices. The choices that I used to make were all that I knew. That was what I thought was the right thing to do. If I had reached out to more people and gotten more opinions, and even if I don't agree, just to get people's thoughts so that I could think outside of my own box, I might have made less of the mistakes I made as far as going back out or relapsing. You know, I just didn't have a community. And part of building a community is calling people, hitting people up, and consistently doing that. You know, you can't call one person one time and be like, I have no friends in the program, or I have no sober friends, I can't do this. All my friends still drink. It's like, yeah, because you have to build those friendships, you have to cultivate them, you have to actively seek what you need. If you've been listening to this podcast and getting something out of it, that's amazing, and please keep listening. Obviously, I don't want to discourage you from doing that, but I also recommend taking another step and hitting people up on your own so that you can talk, shoot the shit. If you have no one to call genuinely, like, really hit me up. Like, we can just talk off the record and shoot the shit. I'm always willing to chat with people about this stuff because it's like, this is my livelihood. Like, I would have nothing if I wasn't sober. Before I went into rehab, I was just broken. It's crazy how much can come from opening up. All right, so let's jump into the reading. From Living Sober, Chapter 10, it's called Making Use of Telephone Therapy, which I cannot read without laughing. When we were first trying to achieve sobriety, many of us found ourselves taking a drink without planning to. Sometimes it seemed to happen practically without our knowing it. There was no conscious decision to drink, and there was no real thought about possible consequences. We had not intended to set off an entire drinking episode. Now we have learned that simply postponing that first drink, putting something else in its place, provides us with a chance to think about our drinking history, to think about the disease of alcoholism, and to think about the probable results of starting to drink. Fortunately, we can do more than just think about it, and we do. We telephone someone. Hey. When we stopped drinking, we were told repeatedly to get AA people's telephone numbers, and instead of drinking, to phone these people. At first, the thought of telephoning, I can't stop laughing about it. All right, trying to grow up here. Here we go. At first, the thought of telephoning a new acquaintance, someone we barely knew, seemed strange, and most of us were reluctant. But the AAs, those with more non-drinking days behind them than we had, kept suggesting it. So sober people kept suggesting it. They said they understood why we hesitated because they had felt the same way. Nevertheless, they said just try it at least once. And so, finally, thousands and thousands of us have. To our relief, it turned out to be an easy, pleasant experience. Best of all, it worked. Maybe the quickest way to understand this before you try it is to put yourself mentally in the place of the person being called. It is a rewarding and gratifying thing to be trusted that much. So the person receiving the call is almost invariably nice, even charming about it, not at all surprised, and even glad to hear from us. There's more. Lots of us have found that when we started to drink, we could telephone someone more experienced in sobriety than we were, and it was not even necessary to mention that we were thinking of drinking. That was often understood without a word, and it really did not matter what time we called, day or night. That's in italics. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, we found ourselves suddenly, inexplicably undergoing an onslaught of anxiety, fear, terror, even panic, which made no sense. This happens to a lot of human beings, of course, not just to alcoholics. When we told the truth about the way we really felt, what we were doing, and what we wanted to do, we found we were perfectly understood. We got total empathy, not sympathy. Everyone we called, remember, had been in exactly the same boat sometime or other, and they all remembered vividly. More frequently than not, only a few moments of conversation made our thought of a drink disappear. Sometimes we got practical, eye-opening information, or gentle, indirect guidance, or tough, direct, heart-to-heart advice. Sometimes we found ourselves laughing, hopefully. Observers of recovered alcoholics have noticed the extensive network of informal social contacts among AA members, even when we were not at a 12-step meeting, and often when no one is thinking or talking of drinking. We found we can have about as much social life with each other as we want, doing together the usual things friends do, listening to music, chatting, going to plays and movies, eating together, camping, fishing, sightseeing, or just visiting, in person or by note or telephone. All without the necessity of a single drink, which I guess we should add to that list: podcasting, anything social distancing. Such acquaintanceships and friendships have a unique value for those of us who choose not to drink. We are free to be ourselves among people who share our own concern for the maintenance of a happy sobriety without being fanatically against all drinking. It is possible, of course, to remain sober among people who are not recovered alcoholics, and even among those who drink a lot, though we will probably feel some social discomfort in their company. But among other sober alcoholics, we can be sure that our recovery from alcoholism is highly prized and deeply understood. It means a lot to these friends, just as their health is cherished by us. The transition to enjoyment of sobriety sometimes begins when, newly sober, we keep in touch with others equally new at the game. At first, it often seems a little awkward to strike up friendships with people who have been sober for years. We're usually more at ease with those who, like ourselves, are just setting out toward recovery. That's why many of us make our first telephone calls about not drinking to our AA contemporaries. Telephone therapy, oh my God, works even when we don't know any individual to call, since a number for AA is listed in practically every telephone directory in the United States and Canada, and in many other countries, aka today that would be on the internet. It is easy to simply dial that number and instantly be in touch with someone who honestly understands at gut level. It may be a person we never met, but the same genuine empathy is there. Reaching out through the internet can also help. Wow, good for you guys. Making a connection with another alcoholic in your own hometown or perhaps halfway around the world. Once the call is made, it is much, much easier to make another when it is needed. Finally, the need to talk away the desire for a drink virtually disappears for most of us. When it does, many of us find, however, that we've established the beneficial habit of occasionally friendly phone call visits, so we keep them up because we enjoy them. But that usually comes later. At first, telephone therapy is primarily for helping us stay sober. We reach for the phone instead of a drink, even when we don't think it will work, even when we don't want to. Bars. All right, so super helpful, right? I mean, I really recommend this book to anyone that doesn't have it because it's just chock full of practical advice. And as someone who's just been calling people and talking to randos from the internet and people from my life that are sober, I can assure you that I feel at my strongest in sobriety right now. It's just crazy. Like, I'm not scared to call people now. Like, I got real mad the other day. I just called my sponsor. And even though I've had tons of sponsors in the past, like, I would usually deal with that stuff on my own without reaching out to somebody. I will also say that no one speaks on behalf of any 12-step program. So if you call someone because you're like, oh, they're in AA, like, they're definitely going to have stuff that's good for me to hear, and they tell you something that doesn't sit right with you, or really anyone, if you call anyone, sober or not, and what you hear is like, you're kind of iffy about it, or maybe they're just not nice. Like, one time I had to call the Nashville intergroup, and I was like, I just moved to the city, I don't have a car, I need to figure out how to get to a meeting. And the lady on the phone was literally like, I don't know what you want me to do. And I was like, what? Like, so that I did have that experience, and I felt angry. Like, I felt betrayed by what's supposed to be a 12-step program that includes everyone. But she's just a person working for the intergroup. She's just one individual. Like, no one represents the organization as a whole. AA does not have a CEO. So if you call someone and they're rude, mean, I mean, I hear people say all the time, why don't you just have a drink then if you want to drink? Like, to me, that's not good advice. Like, I get the point of, like, if you really want to drink, no one's going to stop you. Yeah, true. But if you're reaching out to someone and asking for help and they're saying that to you, it's like, bro, that's why I called you. It's because, like, that's what I'm trying not to do. So I guess what I'm saying is use the phone for sure. Take everything with a grain of salt. And if you don't get what you need from one person, just keep calling people. Like, legit, just keep calling people. And then podcasts and stuff is great. Right now, I've been listening to a lot of podcast recovery. I'm actually on a couple of their episodes, which is lit. There's Sober Sisters. Oh, Facebook groups have been lit for me too. I've been up in those, just trying to find a community. For a while, I was doing Recovery Elevator, and I think I stopped just because I felt like it was a little too lectury. I'm still really grateful for it. It gave me like a foundation for what I wanted in a podcast and what I didn't want in a podcast. I also say for sure this episode of just me chatting is like me at my most lectury. So I appreciate you being here. If you like this, let me know. If you did not like this, let me know. I have a couple more ideas for resource shares as mini episodes. So I plan to keep doing them unless people are like, no, you suck. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you stay sober today. Literally just don't pick up today, no matter what. Peace.